History 1.
Food by eating a homemade family-sized lasagna for every meal over 2 days.
My GF lives in my apartment complex and I met her one day in September while I was out walking my dog. We ended up going on a date that same night and pretty much instantly hit it off and started hanging out with each other almost every day. We would spend whole days together on weekends and we did so many fun things together. I really enjoyed her company and started falling for her. My girlfriend warned me in November that from mid-month to December 15th she would be unavailable. I thought that meant that I wouldn't be able to see her that often. I didn't know that it meant communication from her would become almost non-existent. She stopped texting me the usual "I miss you" or saying "goodnight handsome." It started going longer between texts. After a half week of this I talked with her and asked if she was okay, and if we were okay. She explained that we were okay but she was just incredibly busy and all she really has capacity for is work and sleep, and maybe stopping to eat. But she apologized for making me feel anxious and said she would try. Well, time went on and it got to be 2 weeks since we had spent any time together. I had gotten to see her a few times for maybe 5 minutes in passing. Then my texts and calls started going unanswered. She had told me the last time we were able to speak on the phone that if I ended up getting off early enough on the following Saturday that I could come over for a bit and we could hang out. I called her that night and it rang to voicemail. I walked my dog when I got home and when I walked by her apartment I saw that all of her lights were off. So when I got home I texted that it looked like she passed out and I hope she got some good sleep. I didn't hear back for 3 full days. It didn't look to me like her car ever moved out of her driveway. I never saw lights on passing by her house. I started to get worried about her because I know she struggles with certain health issues, is super stressed and hates her job. It seems like she suffers from symptoms of depression. So I texted her just saying I wanted to check in on her and it makes me feel worried when I don't hear back for this long from her. I still didn't hear anything that day. By the following day I was extremely worried about her. I couldn't think about anything else. I reached out to her best friend and asked when the last time that she had heard from her was. She told me it was the prior week. I expressed my worry and said I wanted to give her space but that I was getting worried and I was thinking about going to check on her. Her friend told me that 4 days is plenty of space and that I should go check on her. I went home on my lunch break and I walked over to her house. My anxiety was in my throat. It was still dark in her house from what I could see. Her blinds were all closed. I knocked on the front door. No answer. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I knocked again a bit harder. No answer. I rang the doorbell again. No answer. I knocked hard enough that I felt like she would be able to hear it from the bedroom. No answer. I had my phone out with her text message up and I start seeing the typing bubble. I am on a fucking client call, stop knocking. I immediately left. I sent a text message saying sorry, I was just really worried about her. I thought more and added a little later on that I realized I went overboard with the knocking and I was really sorry. It went another full day and I didn't hear back. I talked to my father who said it doesn't seem like she is communicating, treating you very well. I told him I just wanted to talk to her and I had half a mind to go knock on her door now, at night, just to talk with her and let her know what is going on in my mind. But I was worried about looking crazy or ruining things further. He asked me how much would change from how things have been going. At least if I did this and I could talk with her I would have an answer. So I wrote a text telling her I was gonna stop by for in 5 minutes to just chat for a bit, and that is was really important that we talked. I went over and rang her doorbell. No answer, so I went home and wrote a text telling her how much I liked her, and how this whole situation was making me feel. How I was feeling like I was being ignored and being treated less than. How I needed some communication. How a single text every once in a while would go such a long way. I told her this wasn't a "you need to call me tonight or it's over," but I said I needed to hear from her. I woke up the following morning to see she had sent me a long text around 4 a.m. telling me how busy she has been. Which I knew. How she has barely had capacity to even get to her desk. That she has been working 14-hour days and just crashing. Telling me that she'd already told me she would be unavailable. She said coming to her door while she was working and banging on it was incredibly uncalled for. She said her car had clearly been moved. She said that me doing that while I knew she would be unavailable, and she was at work, she works from home, during work hours is a hard line for her.
History 2.
True, by not checking the sleeping pills my friend gave me before a flight. So, I was flying to Japan and thought I'd get some sleeping pills to knock myself out on the plane. A friend offered me some she had at home, and dumb me, I didn't think twice about it. She has some mental health struggles, borderline, etc., but I just assumed she also had normal sleeping pills. I trusted her and thought, why not? Mid-flight, I popped the pills, expecting a peaceful nap. Instead, I felt super lightheaded and stuck in this weird state between being awake and asleep. I couldn't even get up to go to the bathroom, and when I landed, I had the worst headache ever and felt down and unmotivated the whole day. When I finally Googled what I took, it turned out to be quetiapine, an antipsychotic for schizophrenia or depression. No wonder I felt like crap. Apparently, taking meds you don't need can actually give you the symptoms they're meant to treat. Big facepalm moment, TLDR, trusted a friend and took sleeping pills she gave me before a flight, only to find out later it was quetiapine, an antipsychotic. Felt lightheaded, stuck in a weird half-sleep state, and had a terrible headache after landing. Lesson learned, always check what you're taking, even if it's from someone you trust. Moral of the story, always check what you're taking, even if you trust the person giving it to you. Anyone else have a WTF did I just take story?
History 3.
Foo, by getting too drunk with my best friend. The other night I, 19M, was hanging out with my best friend, 18M, and it was going great. The next morning he had something so he had to leave early, so he stopped drinking, and because I had nothing on till the next night I decided to keep drinking, which we both agreed was chill. We shared the bed because it's a double and we were close friends, and he slept shirtless. This is for context. I have quite a high alcohol tolerance, so there is only 3 times I recall drinking so much I blacked out. One of those times was that night. I awoke the next day and called my friend to see how he got on, and he told me that apparently last night I had spread moisturizer on his back the previous night. I had no clue that I had done this. I was trying to think back as to why, and I had no clue in the slightest. I tried to think of why I would do that sober, and the only 3 that I could think are that I was moisturizing and decided he looked dry, thought he looked dry without me already moisturizing, or his acne looked bad. I was embarrassed to all hell and felt so bad about it, and he obviously was hella uncomfortable by it. I apologized and we hung up. I called him a few minutes later to apologize again and then end the conversation on a nicer topic. It's a few days later and I tried to act like it didn't happen, but Eve been so embarrassed and felt so horrible. So I had tried to message the same amount as normal. I woke up today to see Eve been blocked/unfriended on all social media, and I believe my number has been too. And a few mutuals have also unfriended. I hate myself, why did I do that? I have no clue what was going through my drunk head. All I know is it wasn't malicious or anything, it was probably me trying to be a good friend really badly. Eve lost my best friend of 10 years.
History 4.
True, by helping a friend. True, by helping a friend, no good deed ever goes unpunished, and today I think it encapsulates itself in more ways than one. A friend of mine went to a party tonight where alcohol was being served. I didn't go because I was tired and wanted to decompress, and I did know my friend was drinking wine but thought she declined an invitation to go to the party. Turns out she pre-gamed it without telling anybody there that she was already drinking wine, and when a couple of our co-workers drove her back to her apartment afterwards, she quickly became ill and started to throw up. My co-workers also mentioned that she drank some gin but weren't aware of how much she had. Each of them were away from her sight in different intervals. They freaked out after she said she couldn't breathe, felt really bad, asking them to call her parents. They couldn't manage to unlock the phone passcode in time and called the ambulance because they saw a bunch of her meds on the counter and were worried they might have a bad effect if taken before drinking. They also called me using my contact info on their phones because they knew we were better acquainted compared to everyone else at the party, and when asked about if I knew her parents' numbers, I said I had no way of contacting her family because they live a few cities away. I could hear her being loud and incoherent on the other end and suspected she was drunk. I asked if everything was okay, and the ladies said they weren't comfortable leaving her alone at her apartment. I'm guessing they thought we were also neighbors even though I actually live a short drive away. I ask if they want me to come over after they mention the party going on a few hours earlier, so I leave at about 11:50 p.m., expecting they meant they were wanting to leave for their homes since the holidays are coming up and some had flights scheduled for the weekend, but also felt imposing watching over her while she seemed to kinda blackout drunk. Because my family uses a family locator app, they know where I'm at as long as my location is enabled and it notifies them if I leave my flat, though sometimes it's kinda janky. They also have a ring light I use as a security measure, and it motion detects when I leave. I tried to call my mom and let her know I left due to a possible emergency with the friend and will explain when I get back. My coworkers called an ambulance while I was on my way, so I got their story while paramedics got her ready for transport. I offered to bring a change of clothes and her belongings to the ER since they left after we turned in a baggie of all the meds she might use, then called my parents back while getting directions for the hospital nearby. They proceeded to lose their shit at me, screaming about how stupid I was for involving myself with a problem that wasn't mine and that I was going to get in trouble. My mom especially, saying there could have been drugs at the party or she did drugs before going, all these horrible things about the character of my colleagues and acquaintances for simply hosting a party. Saying that if the police got involved, they'd interrogate me if I went into the hospital to see her and take her back home. The security guard later told me it'd be a few hours at the minimum until I could do so anyway, so it was best I went home for the night while they did overnight observation. And if there was any illegal paraphernalia in the things I touched, that I would be dragged along into the investigation. That my colleagues would falsely allege I was at the party to evade responsibility, if asked, and that I would get kicked out of graduate school the second they'd know the authorities think I was a person of interest. I burst into tears while I drove to the ER and my parents screamed at me to just go back to my flat, like a wailing crybaby. I was just completely taken aback because I thought I was doing something any normal person would do in a situation like this. I'd never encountered it before, yet they acted like I was supposed to know what to do, and then got angrier that I seemingly couldn't comprehend what I was getting myself into.
History 5.
Fool by giving myself frostbite. We got there late, so there wasn't much to do within a 2-hour span, especially since as soon as we got in she took off to her favorite parts. We spent a lot of time at this station with huge bubble wands, waving them like ballerinas and covering each other in bubble tunnels. Here's where I fucked up. It was getting close to closing, so we start heading back and we see this mini attraction that simulates how cold the water was during the Titanic. She stuck her hand in and immediately retracted. Dramatic, I thought. I decide to be a show-off and leave my hand in that 28°-2°C water for 25 seconds. There was a timer on a screen to see how long you could last. Cousin was impressed, goal achieved, and we finished our night and I took her home. Fast forward a day or two and I realize my right hand is now sensitive to even a light touch. Weird. I go to work and proceed like normal, but every time I put a glove on, service worker, or brush it against anything, there's a light sting. I was confused. It felt dry to the touch, so I figure all I need is some lotion. Wrong, I'm not even kidding when I say my hand was on fire. Ironic, I know. It stung so bad for so long I almost had my dad take me to the ER because I couldn't for the life of me think of what was wrong. The pain faded within 15 minutes, but goddamn. Fast forward an entire week and my knuckles are still Sahara, but now they're chapped and have tiny cuts. What the hell is happening? I bring it up to my coworker who worked at a pharmacy, and after describing what my hand was feeling like and my symptoms, she asked if I had been somewhere cold. I told her no, but only then did I remember what I did with my cousin and brought that up to her. She asked me how cold the water was. I told her it was to simulate the Titanic, so about 28 degrees. You gave yourself frostnip, moron. Ah. I have never had frostnip before, and living in South Carolina you would think that would be pretty easy to avoid. Not when you're a dumb.
History 6.
Tfu by accidentally becoming the leader of a duck cult at my local park. Alright, buckle up because this is probably the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. It all started last weekend when I decided to spend some time outside after working from home for 3 weeks straight. I went to the park near my house, armed with a loaf of bread to feed the ducks. Yes, I now know you're not supposed to feed ducks bread, let me ruin their digestive systems in peace. Anyway, I tossed a few crumbs into the pond, and before I knew it, I was surrounded by ducks. Like, an unnatural amount of ducks. They weren't just eating the bread, they were staring at me intensely. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. Then, one particularly bold duck waddled up to me, tilted its head, and quacked 3 times in what I swear was a deliberate rhythm. So naturally, I did the only logical thing and quacked back. This is where things went south. The moment I quacked, every single duck in the park went silent. No quacks, no splashes, no rustling feathers. Just dead silence. Then, as if on cue, they all started waddling toward me. Slowly, I panicked and threw the rest of the bread to distract them, but it didn't work. They ignored it completely and just kept coming. I backed up and accidentally tripped over a rock, landing flat on my back. And that's when the big one, this massive duck that must have been the alpha or something, stood on my chest, stared into my soul, and quacked once. At this point, I was convinced I was going to be pecked to death. But instead, the big duck bowed? Like, it literally lowered its head and bowed. And then all the other ducks followed suit, so now, I guess I'm their leader? I've been back to the park twice since then, and every time, they form a circle around me like some sort of avian cult. My neighbors are starting to notice, and I think the park ranger suspects something because he keeps giving me dirty looks. Tofu by accidentally becoming the supreme leader of the duck cult. Please send help or more bread.
History 7.
Tfu by getting physically low addicted to Tums. So this did in fact happen today, but it started around 2 weeks ago. Someone in my house bought Tums due to a stomach issue they've been dealing with, and I've read that Tums are generally super safe to take. Pregnant women take them all the time. I absolutely love the taste of Tums. I don't know why, but they are more addicting than any normal candy to me. The chalkiness adds so much to the experience, and I haven't tasted anything close to it. This is where I fucked up. I started taking one whenever I walked past the container. I never went over 5 a day, the maximum on the box. I thought I'd just have some and then I'll stop eventually. It's just calcium, right? No harm in that. Well, taking Tums when you have no heartburn apparently causes heartburn. I didn't take any yesterday because the box said not to take it for longer than 2 weeks, and I woke up with an extremely acidic stomach like never before. I have never felt this in my life. It feels like my stomach acid is on steroids. I looked it up and my stomach became physically addicted to the Tums. This is perhaps the most embarrassing addiction a person could have.
History 8.
Tfu by going on a date with someone from Hinge. Okay, so a week or 2 ago I matched with a girl on Hinge. She is in the same town as me, appeared to be my type, similar interests, the whole thing. We chatted on Hinge for a while, and then moved to texting. We had a lot in common, and I found her physically attractive, so I asked her if she wanted to go on a date at a bar/grill in our downtown area of the city we lived in. We made the plans, and I get to the restaurant last night a little early and let her know I was going to grab a table. It was pretty busy and the place didn't do reservations, but told her I'd meet her up front when she got there. She tells me she's walking up, so I let the waiter know and meet her at the front of the restaurant, and a girl who I absolutely did not recognize walks through the door and greets me. After a few seconds I realized it was in fact her, but truthfully probably twice the size of her from the photos. She wasn't stick thin in her pictures, by any means, but probably 100 pounds less than she is now. I believe I did a good job of not looking too shocked and gave her a hug, and we walked back to the table, had dinner, chatted, and I was probably much less chatty than I had been because I was just a bit shocked. I am not someone who has any issues with someone's weight, but I'm a smaller guy, 5 feet 9 inches, 130-ish, and have always found myself attracted to a particular type, which she appeared to have once been, but not any longer. She was cool, and the same person conversationally that I had talked to. But I was not attracted to her physically, and that made me sad, but that's something I have an issue faking. I paid for dinner, walked her to the car, and we went our separate ways. Afterwards, she texts me telling me how wonderful of a night it was and how she can't wait to do it again, to which I took some time to respond to make sure I was respectful and my response was well crafted and not rude in any way, but eventually let her know that I didn't feel a connection and I had a nice evening and would love to be friends. She immediately snaps to, "Oh, you're the same as all of the other guys, you love the old me but not the heavy me," followed by a few more messages detailing her past experiences and trying to explain that if I liked her when she was smaller, why can't I like her now? I truly felt bad, and didn't want to tear her down or make her feel even less self-confident, but reiterated that I would be happy to continue to be friends and talk, but I couldn't see the romantic angle working. She wasn't a fan of that angle, and said she was going to block me, to which I just didn't respond. So today comes around, and for background, I leave my personal phone at the house often if I have a busy workday, and I come home from the office to my friends sending me screenshots. Apparently, this girl had some mutual friends of mine, and she had posted on her Instagram story photos of my Hinge warning her followers to stay away from this guy, he's a POS yada yada yada. I have Instagram, but usually don't have it installed unless I'm painfully bored, so I never saw it, but re-downloaded it to see if the posts were real. Turns out, she found me on Instagram and blocked me, but my roommate showed me on his phone that the posts were indeed there. I had a few people reach out and ask me about it. But I still feel bad and have been confused about the situation all afternoon and wondered if I could have handled it better. She clearly had self-confidence issues, given all her Hinge photos ended up being quite old, and I hate to think I contributed to making that worse. That said, I feel her response has been extremely out of proportion, as I still paid for dinner, walked her to her car, and explained my position in what I thought was a thoughtful way. Anyway, I think that's enough online dating for me for a while.
History 9.
Flew by going to a foreign country on a second date with a woman I met on a dating app. Earlier in the year I matched with an English woman, Tem, on Hinge who was visiting NYC for St. Patrick's Day. Ordinarily I would pass on these types of connections since the logistics would be too difficult to keep anything going if they were to develop in that direction, but this time I figured, whatever, we're not getting married, I can spend an hour with some random attractive stranger. We met up in Brooklyn Bridge Park and walked around Dumbo and talked for a couple of hours. Our conversation was easy and she laughed at most of the things I said. She bought me a cup of tea, we shared our Instagram accounts and we hugged at the end of our meetup. I sent her a message on Hinge thanking her for the cup of tea but didn't hear back for a few hours, so I thought, okay, that's that. I went on Instagram a few hours later and saw I had a new message from her. I was excited to see she wanted to keep talking to me, so we started texting back and forth. A few days into our text communication things got flirty and she sent me a picture of her wearing see-through lingerie. This was a little weird given how we barely knew each other, but I was okay with it. From then on we started texting each other constantly. I would wake up to half a dozen messages from her wishing me a beautiful morning, a small recap of how the beginning of her day went, and some pictures from her walk to work. When I texted her, she would add a little smiley face or heart or fire emoji or something else to just about every single message. So much of what I said to her was hilarious. 2 weeks into talking she asked if I deactivated the dating app we met on and if I could imagine a relationship with her. I told her yes, not because we were dating exclusively, which I think was what she was hinting at, but because I was happy to have one person interested in me, and with the frequency of how often we were texting each other there was no time to pursue anyone else. I didn't tell her all that, just that yes, I had deactivated the app. In the second week of texting, she told me she had plans to come back to visit New York later in the year and I said, I can't wait that long, let's just meet up in Bruges. This idea surprised me just as much as it surprised her. She jumped at the idea and we immediately started making plans to meet up for a long weekend of sex and pastries. Our conversations from there on included variations of aren't we so romantic and impulsive and isn't this exciting? I asked a couple of people if I was crazy and laid out some of the details of our one date and our subsequent communication. None of the people I talked to told me I was crazy, so I went ahead and booked a flight and found an Airbnb which I paid for with my credit card. She sent me half the cost of the apartment on PayPal. In the days after she told me how she couldn't wait to have sex with me and she has an IUD. I tell her I dated someone with one of those and she still got pregnant. This is my way of saying I don't trust them 100% and prefer an extra layer of protection. i.e. condoms, but I don't say this explicitly. She says she's already planning our next trip in her mind to visit me in New York. A week before my long sex weekend is set to start, I schedule a session with my therapist to ask her if this is really stupid. She doesn't seem to think so, and I feel like I have advanced permission to do it. The day after my therapy session, M sends me a bunch of dramatic messages saying stuff like, this is a bad idea, I always do this where I get way into people and imagine a future together and it all falls apart and I ruin it and no matter what happens this is going to have a bad end. I get a little shook by her sudden turn, but everything is paid for and since it's a week out, nothing is refundable, so I try to calm her down and say stuff like, we don't know where this is going, we want to get together again, let's just be in the moment, I still like you and want to go on this trip with you, etc. I talked to one of my friends about this outburst and in the end decide to give him some grace. But later that night I can't stop thinking about what happened and decide I need to say something about how this sudden turn came out of nowhere and scared the shit out of me. So I send her a message and tell her how I feel. In the morning I wake up to 9 messages from M telling me how messed up it was for me to send something like that to her, knowing she would see it first thing in the morning and it would ruin her day, and she always sends me nice messages to wake up to and I never send her nice messages to wake up to, and this is the first message I send her to wake up to? And I should know better not to do something like that to someone with mental health issues. She brings up something I said previously to her which hurt her feelings. She asked me if I could imagine a relationship with her and I said one thing at a time. In the second week we were texting, I apologize for being cruel to her and try to calm the situation down as quickly as possible. It occurs to me that this is not a good sign. M clearly cannot take any criticism, and it reminds me of my mom, who has her own unsorted mental health issues that have severely impacted my entire life, manifesting in depression, anxiety, OCD, low self-esteem, etc. Once things are again smoothed over, I develop a knot in my stomach and try to convince myself everything is fine, and maybe I was the asshole when I told her the things she says has an effect on me. If I bring her wild behavior up, M says, "What, I can't have one bad day?" I say, "Sure, okay, can't wait to see you." 2 days before I'm supposed to fly out, she tells me she has an appointment with her body waxer and asks what kind of pubic hair I like on a woman. I tell her, I have no preference. This question weirds me out. The day arrives and we meet up in Bruges. I'm so nervous to meet someone I don't really know who has exhibited unbalanced behavior, but M is sweet and thankfully I am still attracted to her. The knot in my stomach dissipates slightly. There's problems with our Airbnb, so we get there a few hours after we are supposed to check in, and within a few minutes we're both naked and start fooling around. She asks me if I want to have sex and I say yes. But first I'm going to get a condom. She seems offended and asks me why. I remind her of our previous conversation re IUDs not being 100% effective. How I told her my ex had an IUD and she still got pregnant, which was subsequently terminated. During that conversation, M told me she herself had an unplanned pregnancy a few years prior and also had an abortion. After that experience, M had an IUD put into her body. Yes. I know all of these things. And I also know that I have only spent 2 hours in person with this person prior to today. I tell her I don't want to get another person pregnant, and ask her, "Do you want to get pregnant again?" She flips out and tells me I triggered her with my question, and starts yelling at me. She asks me, "What is the point of having this thing in my body that messes me up so much if I can't have unprotected sex?" I am not sure what is going on. I told a woman I have now spent 8 hours in person with that I want to wear a condom to have sex with her, and she is completely naked, yelling at me about it. I say I can't believe we're having this argument. I told you I got someone pregnant before that had an IUD, the same exact thing that you have inside you, so I do not trust them as an effective form of birth control. She says, "Whatever. You triggered me with your awful question about wanting to get pregnant again. Getting pregnant the first time was so traumatic, and when I got my abortion the guy didn't come with me, and I went through all of it by myself." She puts her stupid matching pajamas on, is crying, and climbs into bed. I don't know what is happening. I am so tired and just want to take a nap after my long day of plane travel. I try to calm her down and console her and say I'm such an idiot. I'm sorry I said such a boneheaded thing. She agrees with me that I'm an idiot. A few minutes later we have sex with a condom. For days to go, anytime we leave the Airbnb, M immediately grabs my hand and holds onto it the entire time. She snores so I am barely getting any sleep. I decide to give up on wearing a condom when we have sex. I know what will happen if I wear a condom, it will ruin her day. I struggle to maintain an erection when we have sex. 2 nights in we are out to dinner and I look over at M and notice she is in distress. She suddenly stands up and leaves and starts pacing back and forth outside the restaurant. I think she is having a hot flash or anxiety or something, but at this point I've decided she is overly dramatic and I don't want to get up and stop eating. M comes back in and tells me she has misophonia and I chew with my mouth open, which is rude and disgusting, and the sound of it is very distressing to her, and asks if I can try to do better. I say, sure, I'll do my best, but she's kinda being an asshole about the whole thing, so we finish our meal, and when we ride the metro, she gets a seat and I stand behind her. A seat opens up a few feet away, so I sit down away from her and Google misophonia, and it sounds like a bummer, a disorder where certain sounds or sights trigger a flight or fight reaction. Yikes. She looks up and realizes I'm not standing in the same place, comes over and sits down next to me and says something like, "We can't sit together?" I wake up on Sunday and say thank God I only have one more day to go. At our last dinner we go out for some traditional food. While we're eating, Em is being quiet and tearing up, and at this point it just seems like her usual mode of being, so I don't say anything. In my head, I'm like, well, it can't have anything to do with me. I am doing great at chewing with my mouth closed. Finally I look up and Em is furious. She says the open mouth chewing has gotten even worse and how could I do this to her? And then she starts crying in the very packed restaurant. I am so uncomfortable and I say, "Do you want to go back to the apartment? I will take care of the check." Every time we go out into public it seems she is going to cry. I say I don't think this is just about loud chewing. She says it's not. The trip is ending and she likes me so much and blah blah, and she ruined everything again. When we get back to the apartment we talk and I apologize for my eating habits. She says, "Oh no, I've ruined everything again." This is the third or fourth time she's said this phrase post-fight and me trying to calm her down. I launch into a long explanation that I understand something of the misophonia. I have OCD and I'm lucky I've been tired this entire trip because it hasn't been that bad. And I'm not gonna tell her to get therapy, but ultimately in my case I realized I have irrational thoughts and I can't take them out on other people who are clueless about them. Clearly she doesn't get my point, which is that this is her problem and she's 35 and she seems to have done nothing and has never gotten help for it. She tells me she broke up with her last boyfriend because he snored, had bad habits and ate with his mouth open. Meanwhile I have never seen anyone eat so much cheese, dessert and unhealthy food in my entire life. It's midnight at this point, and her train leaves at 4:30. We have sex again. At about 1 in the morning, Em is having trouble sleeping and starts thrashing around. I ask if she's okay and she tells me she's mad she can't fall asleep and starts throwing a fit. In my 4 nights with her and I've probably gotten 2 hours of sleep total. I'm so tired that I keep falling asleep but keep getting woken up by her constant movement. I tell her, take a break from trying to sleep, look at your phone for a few minutes or a book or something. She says no, I don't want to do that, I need to sleep, my train leaves in a few hours. She keeps thrashing around. I am lying next to her with my eyes open, amazed at how inconsiderate she is being. Finally I sit up, grab a pillow and say, "I'm sleeping on the couch." The couch is a love seat which is 5 feet across. I am about 6 feet tall. This obviously is not going to work, so I go back to the bed. I get maybe 1 hour of sleep. Em wakes up and goes to take a shower. The bedroom we share is connected to the rest of the apartment with a giant glass window and a room darkening shade to shield it from the light. The shade had not been pulled down the previous night and the light from the bathroom floods into the room and wakes me up. I get up, make unintentional eye contact with Em in the bathroom, and pull the shade down. Right as I'm pulling it down I can see she looks furious. Finally she is ready to leave and I get up to say goodbye to her. She is very mad at me for pulling the shade down and looking at her aggressively while doing it. She says, "It was so rude that you made a thing about how me being awake would wake you up." I say, "Honey, let's not fight, let me bring your suitcase downstairs and see you off." I go to give her the last hug I will ever have to give her and she pulls away and only puts one arm around me. When I get back home we're still in contact with each other. I tell my friend about the trip and she says, "You need to end this." I say, "Yeah, I'm waiting for the right time." She tells me to do it ASAP, and since we spent a whole long weekend together, I should break the news over the phone. I haven't told her that Em coerced me into having unprotected sex with her, so the next day I call her to end things. She immediately starts crying and I again try to calm her down. I tell her, we obviously didn't have a good time. We have trouble communicating, I chew with my mouth open, apparently, we live thousands of miles apart. Do I really need to go on? She asks me why I don't want to stay in touch with and be friends with her. She tells me how rude chewing with my mouth open and pulling the shade down in the morning was. I get off the phone as quick as I can and breathe a sigh of relief. The next day I wake up to a whole bunch of messages on WhatsApp about how unfair I am being to her. I block her on WhatsApp. The next day I wake up to a whole bunch of messages on Instagram in the same spirit, so I block her there too. The next day I wake up to a long email from her where she explains that she just realized I blocked her on WhatsApp and Instagram and she can't understand why I'm shutting her out, and a bunch of other nonsense. I block her on email but apparently not completely. The next day I wake up to a notification from PayPal, "You have a new message." I did not know you could message people on the PayPal app. On PayPal Instant Messenger, she tells me how phony I am and how I should refund her money since I am now mistreating her so horribly. I finally write her an email telling her what she is doing is harassment. And that people go out with each other, and then they stop dating, and there is no need for an ongoing post-mortem or name-calling and trying to figure out what went wrong. She responds, "Okay, you won't hear from me again, but I talked to my mom and all my friends and they all think what you did was very terrible and rude and you are a bad person." I see my therapist a few days later and tell her everything that happened. She says I wished you left immediately when M started yelling about you wanting to use a condom. I explain I felt trapped in a foreign country and I had no idea where to go. She tells me what happened was coercion, which is a form of RPE, and I need to tell M off for my sake. If I don't speak up and tell her how messed up this was now, I may regret it later. I draft a long email about how vile, disturbed and disgusting M is, how if the roles were reversed and if she asked if I could put a condom on before sex and I started yelling about how I want to raw dog her and made her fear for her safety until she acquiesced, would there not be grounds for criminal charges? I send the email. The next day I get a long email back from M about how twisted and disturbed a person I am. I can see this part in the preview section on my Gmail account. I don't open this email and figure out how to completely block her from my email account.